little orphan girl sitting in a dusty library in a district called Kolhapur, staring at some books that were just recently donated. On the cover of those books were faces that looked powerful, that looked confident and important. And immediately, a very strong desire sparked in her. And she said to herself, one day, even I will be on the cover of a book. That little girl was me. I was told I was born in a very remote village near Kolhapur, where electricity still comes and goes, but hope has to fight really hard to stay. My parents struggled to make ends meet. I was called Nisha, that means night, symbolizing darkness. One day, God decided, let there be light in Nisha's life. And my life changed. I was brought to Mumbai. I found a home. I found love. I found family. And they named me Yugandhara. That means strongest in the era. Yes, indeed, today I am very, very strong. But growing up, I was raised around two powerful stories. And I'm sure a lot of Indian girls would be able to relate to these stories. The first story is, when a daughter is born, it's like the blessing of Goddess Lakshmi. And second story, a young daughter is entitled to marriage. Our society even today believes that her future, her security, her dignity comes from being married. And that story almost decided my life. But I refused to marry. I chose to rewrite my own story. I chose education. And for that, I was asked to never come back home. So I left with a scholarship awaiting me, with no financial backing. And then I did what most Indian students do. I wrote submissions, but with a twist. I wrote submissions for seniors, earned money out of it. And that's how I swallowed my struggle, because I hated sympathy. I absolutely hate sympathy. One day I remember I was walking on a railway platform and I saw a young girl without arms, and she was painting with her feet, and she was selling those paintings. And beside her were her two siblings, again without arms and legs. And suddenly my problems looked so small. I immediately thanked God for a healthy body and an entrepreneurial brain. Of course, I was kind of, felt that I was running a startup, writing submissions for seniors, earning money. But that was the day I realized why gratitude matters the most. Yes, of course, dream big, dream wildly, dream fearlessly, dream about, building a billion-dollar idea, becoming change makers, becoming world-class CEOs. But while you are chasing your dream, pause. Pause for a moment and look at the life that you already have. Look around this auditorium. this Wi-Fi, these professors, this opportunity to ask questions, to learn, to fail, to try again. You know what? While we are in this air-conditioned auditorium, there is someone in this world, a student, who is probably walking miles to reach the school with no textbooks, no desks, no internet, praying for the education that you wake up to every single day. Millions of hearts out there who are dreaming for a life that you already are living. Hence, don't let ambitions steal away your gratitude, but let your gratitude fuel your ambitions. I topped my master's and I was picked up through campus for my first job. Wow. And they saw something in me, and they said, let us push this girl into a very challenging role. So they wanted to depute me to Qatar, out of country, different culture. And for that, they wanted my parents' permissions. And I knew if I go back home, I would be married off. So I did something terrifying. Disclaimer, please do not try this at home or anywhere. I forged their signatures and left the country for my first job. I'm sure everyone remembers their first job. What we are taught in theory versus what the real world throws at us. So different, right? We go all in our first job with full high josh. How is the josh high, sir? I'll be the change maker. I will change the system and show them how it is done. I'll be a status quo challenger. And what do they do on our first day? Ask us to fix the printer. How is the josh then? I remember my first job. I, as a fresh graduate, sitting in front of these Arab sheikhs in their white robe, feeling very intimidated. Honestly, I had absolutely no real world experience. And I couldn't even understand their accent. And to top this, I was the only girl in the entire office, which meant I had to prove myself twice and complain half as much. I cried for 6 months. Little did I know back then the importance of communication skills, the importance of confidence, believing in yourself, in-depth technical knowledge, the way you carry yourself, body language, your presentations, negotiation skills. But I had to learn all this from my first job. So I did. I learned, I read every single night. I practiced every single day. I asked stupid questions. I failed loudly, and 2.5 years later, I was so good that they did not want me to go. Then comes emotional atyachar. Family calls. Are beta, at your age we had two children. At least now get married, please, beta, please, please. I see a few smiles here. I'm sure they are getting those calls regularly. I had to give in to the pressure. So I was married off to America. You know, back then there was a trend, American dream. Want a son-in-law for our most eligible daughter from the US of A. I'm sure a lot of Gen Zs out here won't be able to relate, because the trend now is get married to a startup founder. $1 billion couple. Huh? But back then, there was this trend, the American dream. So, I went, I married. But then came this condition in my marriage. I was told to be a homemaker. Homemaker. That was the first time I ever heard that term, homemaker. And I was very excited. Homemaker. Someone who makes a home into a beautiful, loving home. Right? So I was sold. I packed my bags with big dreams and flew to the US of A. Just to realize homemaker was the equivalent of a housewife. A thankless job, absolutely unappreciated, and unfortunately in my case, unsafe. Lot of domestic violence, lot of suffocating silence. One day, 2018, my life flipped, just like that. My 2-year-old son and I were abandoned. The home was taken away, the money was gone. My son and I found ourselves in a shelter home. Yes, shelter home. I remember that day very vividly. I was completely broken, emotionally, financially, physically, mentally, and I wanted to give up. My 2-year-old son, in his broken English, comes to me and says, "Mom, if something happens to you, I will have no family." Those little hands on my face taught me something that no school ever could, that resilience is not optional, that courage sometimes comes from responsibility, and that love turns fear into fire. You all listening here, there would be many moments in your life where you would want to give up. When the weight feels heavy, when failure feels final. But remember, somewhere someone is counting on you to rise. It might be your family, it might be your team, it might be a version of you which is not yet born. In my case, it was my son. So I picked up the first job that came my way, that of a janitor in a daycare. So they could keep my son and I could clean for them. But I was the best janitor. I did so well even as a janitor. Why? Because I believe in excellence and not just job titles. It has become a habit now, excellence. The principal of the daycare, she reads my employment form. Educational qualification, BTech, MTech. She calls me and she says, "Why are you here?" And that's when I realized, why should someone tell me my self-worth? What happened to that little girl who dreamed big? Why isn't she writing her own story? And that's when I started rewriting my story. In the morning, I was a janitor. In the afternoon, I got an unpaid IT internship as a developer in New York. And in the evening, I used to come back to New Jersey. I was a cashier in an Indian grocery store. And in the night, I was a mother. I was exhausted. I was exhausted. But whenever I felt exhausted, I remembered that young girl with no arms painting. And I refused to give up. I kept going. That unpaid internship, I didn't think about, payment. I was just hungry to learn. I learned so much about how tech startups work in that unpaid internship. And my next job was a high paying job. And then came Harvard. Yes, Harvard. And then I thought to myself, when God has given me so many opportunities to rise again and again, why don't I build something where others can get opportunities to rise? And hence, I built Virtualist, where we unearth top talent from tier 2, tier 3 places of India and onboard them and work and train them on confidence level, communication skills, and upskill them technically, and then put them on giant projects. Today, Virtualist is listed in Forbes. I have won many national and international business accolades. My son today is 10 and he loves playing tennis. I found love again. A lovely British gentleman. But the most fulfilling is that I adopted an entire school with 700 orphan children, looking after their complete education. Very fulfilling. Here. So, the lessons that I learned from my experiences, that you are not limited by where you have been born, but you are limited by the stories that you accept in your life. Today, that little girl who dreamed of having herself on the cover of a book is very soon launching her own autobiography. And why? Because stories are meant to be rewritten. Thank you.